between individual and other beings, thereby working as a tool to avoid conflict and unite the living beings. Dhamma is founded on the understanding of interconnectedness of all phenomena, and hence it relates to the roots and fruits of all actions. Essentially, it serves to protect one who protects and observes them. Dhammo have rakhatu dhammachari. Therefore, Dhamma embraces every type of righteous conduct, covering every aspect of life essential for sustenance and welfare of individual and society, and includes those rules which guides and enable those who believe in the ultimate truth or nature and attain nirvana or moksha. Dhamma on the external level refers to the path of practice that the Buddha taught to his followers. This Dhamma has three levels of meaning. The word of the Buddha, that is Buddha Vachana, which is Pariyatti, the practice of his teaching, Patipatti, and the attainment of experience or enlightenment, Pativeda. It includes not only the conditioned things and states, but also the non-conditioned and the absolute nirvana. There is nothing in the universe or outside, good or bad, conditioned or non-conditioned, relative or absolute, which is not included in this term. Friends, since the time is short, so I have to, Geshe-la says that I have to see the time factor also. I can say that, the importance of the Tipitaka gets reverberated in the Eightfold Path, the path of Sila, Samadhi, and Panya, as mentioned earlier. This Dhamma and the practical aspect of which is Vipassana meditation is the key which needs to be understood. The technique which leads to the total purification of the mind and realization of the eternal peace. This technique finds mention in this very Tipitaka, in several places in the Nikaya as Mahasatipatthana Sutta or Majjhima Nikaya as Satipatthana Sutta, etc. The influence of the Buddha's contribution is not limited to Indian thought. The deep impact of his teaching is available and is also visible in the spiritual thought, in spiritual and literature of the rest of the world. Thus, Tipitaka, or the words of the Buddha, carry a special significance for human race even today. The stately grandeur of the Buddha's teaching will be verdant forever. It is the perennial forerunner of the resurrection of the fallen human values. What could be more relevant to the current state of moral degradation with its inevitable result of downtrodden people afflicted with misery? In this way, we find in the addition to its spiritual aspect, which is no doubt one of the core of the Pali Tipitaka, it also depicts different aspects of society's development: paleographical, linguistic, literary, religious, philosophical, ethical, socio-political, artistic, each of which deserves patient study, special investigation, and careful consideration and prudent judgment in terms of its contribution to the society. Although Pali died out as a literary language in the mainland India, but survived elsewhere until the 18th century, today Pali Tipitaka is studied mainly to gain access to Buddhist scriptures, and it's frequently chanted in the ritual context. The secular literature of Pali historical chronicles, medical texts, and inscriptions is also of great historical importance. The great centers of Pali learning remain in the Theravada nations of the South and the Southeast Asia, like Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia. Since the 19th century, various societies for the revival of Pali in India have promoted awareness of languages and its literature, including Mahabodhi Society, which was founded by Anagarika Dhammapala. If we ponder over the period of the last 60 years in India, we see that it was in 1956, with the celebration of 2,500 years of Mahaparinirvana of Buddha Jayanti celebration by Government of India, that the studies of Pali and Buddhist studies started in India. This was the time when institutions mainly devoted to Pali and Buddhist studies like Navanalanda Mahavihara, Department of Buddhist Studies in Delhi University, etc. developed. For the first time, Pali Tipitaka in Devanagari script, along with some commentaries, were published by Navanalanda Mahavihara. For the first time, researchers and scholars got the opportunity to read the original words of the Buddha. Credit for all this goes mainly to three great luminaries, Rahul Sankrityayana, Bhadanta Ananda Kaushalyayan, and Bhikshu Jagdish Kashyap. Subsequently, in the following years, several departments of Pali and centers of Buddhist studies started developing throughout India, like in Bombay University, Banaras Hindu University, Nagpur University, Jammu University, Calcutta University, Srinagar University, Pune University, Baba Saheb Ambedkar Marathwada University, Gautam Buddha University, Sachi University, and down to Nagarjuna University in South India, etc. In the last 4 decades, great work of propagation and promotion related with the Pali literature and Tipitaka studies have been done by Vipassana Research Institute, Igatpuri. The institute, under the able guidance of Acharya Dr. Satyanarayan Goenka, published the entire Chatta Sangayan edition of Tipitaka, Attakathas and Tikas into Devanagari script, which gave a great boost to Pali studies. It was on the basis of the VRI edition that I started the publication of the first ever Pali Sanskrit Hindi dictionary from Navanalanda Mahavihara in 7 volumes. The first volume of this was released by His Excellency, the President of India, Dr. Abdul Kalam, in 2007 at the concluding function of the 2550th Buddha Jayanti celebration in Kushinagar. Till now, 5 volumes have been released and 2 more are yet to come. With the popularity and relevance of the Vipassana meditation, several institutions like Mahabodhi Society Bangalore, Mahabodhi Society Leh Ladakh, and several institutions in Maharashtra are promoting Pali studies. The Government of India, through its Ministry of Culture, is also providing funds for Pali and Buddhist studies, and also to several Buddhist monastic institutions. Friends, to conclude, I may say that there has been increase in the institution of Pali and Buddhist studies in India, but still there is a great need to promote the studies of original Pali Sutta as a part of the curriculum in the universities, since most of the universities teach with the help of the secondary materials in the form of translations for the teaching, unlike which is done in a country like Myanmar and Sri Lanka, etc. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Ravindra Pant, for your wonderful gist of the 3 Pali Tipitaka studies in India, how it is happening, and detailed information. Now, I would like to take only one question because of the time constraint. I'm cutting down time from each of the presenters, so I'm giving them only kind of 25 minutes. They were kind of originally allocated 30 minutes. So I take one question. Please, I'm requesting, be precise. Don't kind of expand the question. Be precise and short when you ask the question, okay? So that is my request. If you have question, please ask.
And otherwise also, Geshe-la, I'm here. So they can always approach me and ask questions.
Sure, if you have any issues yet, that you can approach him anytime later on. So I presume that there is no question. So please, Professor Dr. Ravindra Pant, take your seat. Now I call next speaker here. Venerable Ashin Sarana, please, I give you 20 minutes to finish your paper, and then have the question and answer later on. Thank you.
Dear participants, respected Sayadaws, rectors, professors, lecturers, venerable sirs, venerable nuns, teachers, organizers, and ladies and gentlemen. Before we delve into the different ways of learning and studying Tipitaka, let's first discuss the scope of the text under study.
Thank you very much.
Differing texts provide the student with a variety of advantages and disadvantages in their study. The teachings of the Buddha were verbally rehearsed during the first Buddhist council, and all the subsequent texts are supposed to be in line with it. All scriptures of Theravada Buddhism, which are universally accepted as valuable and worthy of study, are in the Pali language, the language most probably spoken by the Buddha himself. The original script of the language did not survive, and therefore each Buddhist country has applied its own writing system to the textual form of their language. In the second half of the 20th century, the Sixth Buddhist Council decided what scriptures are to be considered as part of the proper Theravada literature. A large number of texts were included and incorporated into the canonical Pali literature. The Sixth Buddhist Council led to the international approval of categorizing the Buddhist scriptures into three main layers. Firstly, Mula, the main text, which mostly comprises the Buddha's and Arahant's wisdom as shared during the First Buddhist Council. It is also known as the Tipitaka, literally the three baskets, and comprises of the Sutta Pitaka, the collection of the Buddha's discourses, the Vinaya Pitaka, the code of monastic discipline, and the Abhidhamma Pitaka, the essential teachings of the Buddha. Yesterday in question, I mentioned that Tipitaka has 20 books, but that was because I was stressed, confused, and I made mistake. The Burmese edition of Tipitaka has 40 books, and to get the award of Tipitaka Dhara, you need to memorize 20 books. This is good to know, so that we know what do we respect the Tipitaka Dharas for, that they memorized all 20 books of Tipitaka, whole 50%. Secondly, Atthakatha, the commentaries, the explanations, stories, and metaphors rooted in the uncanonized knowledge of the great masters who attended the First Buddhist Council, then enriched by a large amount of information gathered over 7 or more centuries, finalized by the famous Venerable Buddhaghosa in the 5th century AC. Thirdly, Tika, the sub-commentaries and sub-commentaries, written mostly in the first half of the 2nd millennium, partially by Sinhalese monks and partially by Burmese. Although the Sixth Buddhist Council inserted the previously non-canonical Milinda Panha into the Mula main text and Visuddhimagga into the Atthakatha commentaries, there are still many other texts which didn't find their place in the three layers. These include Abhidhammatta Sangaha, known as Tenjo in Myanmar, Jinattapakasanitika, Sattubimba Sutta, Sara Sangaha, Sutta Sangaha, and Chatubhana Varipali, to name only a few. The fact that these texts are not included in the three strata of Pali scriptures says nothing about their veracity. Some of them are faithful selections of discourses from the acknowledged texts. Some of them paraphrase or give more detail on the Mula or Atthakatha. When we talk about studying Buddhist texts, we need to keep in mind that all those texts are worth reading and studying. They are revered as carriers of the Buddha's teachings, the preservation of the pure Dhamma wisdom, and the correct and complete guide to the liberation from the cycle of rebirth. I believe that deciding on the value of each text is the crucial point at which students get wrong views or incomplete understanding. Each teacher and each group of scholars select their favorite texts and give them special importance while sometimes criticizing or rejecting other texts. I noticed that in Western countries it is fairly widespread to reject the commentaries, sub-commentaries, and even parts of the main text, such as Abhidhamma, Apadana Pali, and Buddhavamsa. Their logic is based on assumptions of materialist, nihilist scholars, and ignoring or even being unaware of their attachment to such views, they promote only those texts which are in line with their selection of certain assertions of certain scientists. The words I use are strong, but I believe that they point at an important issue. Materialism is the assumption that only matter exists, not mind. Nihilism is the rejection of next life. And attachment to views is the inability to accept ideas which do not fit into the box of their own beliefs. Consequently, such scholars play God in selecting what is right and what is wrong, limit study resources, and support bias toward unsupported assumptions. In this way, unnecessary arguments arise, and with them much hate, envy, quarrel, and enmity within the single community of Theravada Buddhists. All that just because some scriptures are prioritized and some others are condemned. I would like to take this opportunity to show how the Burmese attitude toward the scriptures is much more suitable in the long run when preserving the Buddha's teachings and the correct and effective understanding of wisdom and the path toward wisdom. In Myanmar, all Buddhist scriptures are highly revered and studied as much as possible. In fact, the Buddha himself implied that all Buddhist texts have the same essence, namely that they support the progress on the path toward liberation from all suffering. Sayadaw paharada maha samuddo ekaraso lonaraso evamevan ko paharada ayang dhamma vinayo ekaraso vimuttaraso. Suppose paharada that the great ocean has a single taste, the taste of salt. Indeed, in the same way, paharada, this teaching and discipline have a single taste, the taste of liberation. Some scriptures which seem to summarize the rest or give clear explanation are studied first, and then with the basic knowledge and understanding, the students are encouraged to read and learn further information from anywhere in the wide range of Pali resources. Knowledge about Buddhism started to penetrate the Western Hemisphere only a few centuries ago, and the people reaching it were Christian and materialist nihilist scholars. Studying scriptures of a religion that one doesn't follow has both advantages and disadvantages. On one hand, there might be an objective point of view, free from attachment to views and expectations, but the cultural and historical background of that belief system and the experience of following the religion may be missing. I would like to show that the objective view, often easily ascribed to scholars outside the religion, is only an illusion. The Western scholars, strongly impacted by views and discoveries of their own esteemed philosophers and scientists, compared the Buddhist teachings to ideas and ideals which themselves needed scrutiny. It is very common that information which doesn't come up to the materialist, nihilist views of modern scientific hypotheses is immediately rejected and dismissed as phantasmagoria and irrelevant information. This attitude has a profound impact on how the scriptures are viewed and how their historicity is assumed. For example, with the assumption that nothing like a heaven exists, it was easy to reject the idea that Abhidhamma was taught by the Buddha in heaven. This consequently dismissed the possibility that the Buddha himself taught Abhidhamma and thereby its historic value. By dismissing the existence of heaven and gods, the Buddhist scripture most revered in Myanmar has been turned into irrelevant philosophizing of speculative monks. The scripture which, in my opinion, as well as in the opinion of the ancient commentaries, contains the deepest wisdom, which embodies the Buddha's greatest teachings, has been rejected and dismissed simply because it didn't fit into the narrow views of those who studied it. This is only one of many such examples. Western scholarship of Theravada Buddhism has produced two outcomes. First, there are selections of the texts which fit well into the already existing views of the scholars and which are deemed presentable to a public biased by current scientific hypotheses. Then there is an open research of the texts in their original form, studying everything without distinction, more as the art of literature, rather than as anything to enrich the reader by wisdom or useful information. The picky trend in presenting Buddhist scriptures to a trusting, unfortunate public nevertheless led a number of men and women into Asia to become monastics. However, while many of these are open-minded and keep investigating their current views and broadening their perspectives and understanding, some of them retain their preconceived views which they previously adopted from Western scholars, and with those views continue studying and following the sacred texts of the Buddhists. As a result, all around the world, large communities appeared where important parts of Tipitaka, such as Abhidhamma, are never studied, nor the reading of even encouraged. Commentarial literature is rarely available to students of these monks, and the commentarial knowledge is not commonly known. If ever mentioned, it is commonly rejected immediately when it doesn't fit their current belief system. This is a problem. Whether we believe something or not, it is, in my opinion, unethical to discourage study and prevent knowledge. The scriptures of Tipitaka and the commentaries were written by knowledgeable monks, accepted by hundreds of thousands of great masters, and even greater numbers of monks benefited from the information on the path to purify their minds from greed, hatred, ignorance, to develop genuine love for all beings, and to attain stability in peace and happiness. Denying sources of knowledge to their students, some Western scholars teach a fragmental version of the path to liberation rather than a comprehensive and complete path in the way the Buddha has shown to us. We need to acknowledge the truth as it is, deluding ourselves with the idea that scholars know everything and are always unbiased is not useful for anything. Scholars do not know everything and commonly stay biased. In fact, Western scholars of Buddhism rarely ever question the background of their attitudes and beliefs. I am well aware of the unpleasant way in which I am sharing my feelings. However, this is not from a wish to offend the Western audience or to create any dissension between the West and East. Rather, I would like to encourage the Western audience to disprove my sincere feelings about their attitudes. I wish that the Western scholars and students of Buddhism to reduce their conceit, open themselves up, explain the standpoints from which they study the Buddhist texts, and show the reasons for the positions they take. Do they think, with a strong view that heaven and gods do not and cannot exist, their understanding of the Buddhist scriptures, written with the undisputed understanding that heaven and gods do exist, is giving them complete freedom in studying the scriptures without any preconceived bias or dogma? Is there any way how they can prove that the scientific hypotheses, those which they accept in contrast to those which they do not accept, are worth attachment at any cost? Would they at least reveal what are the scientific dogmas with which they study the sacred texts and what scientific dogmas they have rejected and why? Why do they think that the dogmas which they attach to while studying the scriptures have no impact on the resulting theses, papers, books, and lectures which these scholars then produce? Obviously, certain beliefs, upbringing, and conditionings will always play a role in assessing a text. The point is that the author's standpoint should be clearly mentioned before they reject an ancient scripture as worth studying. We can read in scholarly reviews various ideas about the historicity of certain texts, but the authors won't reveal their standpoint, such as that they don't believe in heaven, etc., because such information would disqualify the author among those who believe otherwise. In the field of comparative religion, we learn that studying religion as its follower as well as somebody outside brings a lot of advantages and disadvantages. The attitude of Western scholars is widely varied, but rarely revealed to the reader. I believe that unlike in the Buddhist countries, where people are open to whatever the scriptures say, learn it, try to understand it, compare it, and make their utmost efforts to examine their wisdom found therein, in non-Buddhist countries, in the West, understanding the variable background of the author is essential for understanding their reviews and conclusions made based on their studies. It is easy to understand that a Christian scholar or a materialist nihilist will reject Abhidhamma as the Buddha's word, because they don't believe in existence of multitude of gods, and they don't believe that such gods would obediently listen to a human being. Unfortunately, scholars commonly do not reveal their beliefs and attitudes before they present their conclusions. And with the variety of different theories, the helplessly trusting public is subjected to confusion as to whose opinion is unbiased and whose is biased. Critical thinking or faithful memorizing, which is more important? When we compare the Western and Eastern styles of studying texts, we can see two extremes. In the East, likewise earlier in the West, the common way of studying was by memorizing. The teacher prescribed a number of texts to memorize, and the students then, during the examination, recited them by heart. With the advent of modern education, in the way the Czech Jan Amos Comenius and the Swiss Johann Heinrich Pestalozzi in the 17th and 18th centuries suggested and explained, in the West, the rote memorization method gradually decreased to minimum and was replaced by an emphasis on intellect, critical thinking, learning through one's own experience, and the promotion of creating new ideas, all of which shape the education system we have now in the West. Unfortunately, the Western system, in my opinion, has gone too far in critical thinking at the expense of correct knowledge of source information. When the requirement to memorize the basic texts was removed from the education system, the opportunity for nonsensical ideas, fallacies, and idiocy increased by simply disregarding details, or sometimes even important points from the source text. As a striking example, we can mention the philosophy of flat earth societies. Studying little but thinking too much, these adult people concluded that the earth is flat, and the experience of it being spherical is only an illusion. The Western downfall of the ability to retain information in its original form has resulted in unnecessary disputes, controversies, and conflicts. In the field of comparative religion, some Western scholars have caused a huge amount of misunderstanding and distortion, not intentionally, but just because they failed to memorize the source text and missed out details which were in fact important. The Asian system of education suffers from the opposite extreme. Rote memorization is a kind of learning that doesn't involve thinking, reflection, or analysis. Although a number of great monks in Myanmar, such as Ashin Maharatthasara and Sayadaw Ujjanakabhivamsa, suggested that critical thinking should be incorporated in the scriptural studies, most of the institutes of monastic education seem to disregard those suggestions. We could easily ask, how many students in Myanmar monastic education institutes ask questions during the classes? How many hours every week are students encouraged to engage in debating the studied text? The disadvantage of restricting studies to rote learning is that the memorized information is not easily connected to the real situation, and in case of insufficient explanation of the memorized text, there is an opportunity for misunderstanding, argument, and conflict. Understanding the memorized text and training in application of the memorized text to the real situation is essential in the fulfillment of the educational process. As a graduate student of the Buddhist and Pali University of Sri Lanka, I will share with you results of my observations based on my experience in that university and other universities which I have visited and heard of in Sri Lanka. Sri Lankan Buddhist universities try to match the standard of Western university education in the prestige of the awarded degrees and consequently by the system and quality of the education. Studying at a Sri Lankan Buddhist university is very similar to studying a university in the West, especially with regards to the emphasis on critical thinking. The students who only memorize the teacher's words simply do not pass their examinations. That is because the examination paper requires the knowledge received from the teacher, its critical assessment, additional knowledge from other sources, and also one's own substantiated opinion. The exclusiveness of critical thinking in Buddhist universities has, however, brought about a lot of damage to the purity of the transmitted information. Because the students are not led and required to memorize larger parts of the original text, they are not able to distinguish what kind of ideas about the source text and the original philosophy are aligned with the sources and which are fallacies due to imperfect reading of a source. The information received from a wide variety of books and authors is then affecting their view about the source text, And without the ability to spot mistakes and misrepresentation of the authors, the students themselves attach to fallacious ideas and spread them further. I have actually heard of a teacher who teaches that if in the scriptures is anything about the gods or about the next life, then that is coming after the Buddha, that this is not the teachings of the Buddha. That much is this serious. Excluding memorization from the educational process, the technique of critical thinking has led many graduate and postgraduate students to ill-conceived ideas, creating unnecessary dissent in the Buddhist community, conflicts, loss of the appropriate respect for the original texts, and disruption of peace and harmony. It would be much more useful if Buddhist universities all around the world apply both the requirement of memorizing as well as critical thinking. The degrees awarded to their students would then lead to a multitude of excellent scholars whose ideas support harmony and understanding, respect toward the texts, and opportunity to attain true wisdom. In the Buddha's teachings, there are 3 levels of wisdom. Suttamai Panya, which is the wisdom gained through knowledge, hearing or listening or reading. Chintamai Panya, which is the wisdom gained through thinking about the learned text. And then Bhavana Panya, a wisdom which is gained through meditation, which, however, is dependent on that thinking and listening. Studying and memorizing Tipitaka is the first of the 3 levels in wisdom, the Suttamai Panya. Critical thinking about the memorized text is Chintamai Panya. Finally, applying knowledge and understanding in one's meditation practice leads toward the attainment of the highest wisdom, Bhavana Panya. Nowadays, the first 2 levels of gaining knowledge are aptly applied by a number of educational institutions around the world. It would be very helpful if the 2 are mindfully balanced so that the students can successfully protect and promote the correct instructions and explanations which lead to the attainments of supernatural wisdom, equanimity, purity of mind, and genuine love toward all living beings. May all beings be happy and healthy.
Sadhu. Thank you very much, Venerable Ashin Sarana, for your wonderful presentation. I'm particularly impressed with the number 2 and number 3 and number 4. These are very, very enlightening issues that really needed to be brought up into the attention of the public. As usual, I'm taking the questions. So I'm giving time to only 2 questions now. 2 questions. Please make sure that you kind of don't extend the question. Please be precise and short when you ask the question, okay? Don't keep commenting a lot. Okay, please, the lady at the corner. I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Lady at the corner, and after that, Professor Alexei. Yeah. Yeah. Lady at the corner first. So let the lady go first. Yeah.
Shall I go first? Okay. Thank you very much, Bhante, for your very thought-provoking intervention. I have just one question. I had similar discussions on the same topics with some practitioners and friends.